Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. We are chatting Rush, and we've made it to 1987 with Hold Your Fire, their 12th studio album, so we're deep into their career at this point. And it is at this point that I may start to sound a little bit more critical, because, if I think of the weaker albums in Rush's catalog, Hold Your Fire is one that comes to mind. And that's by no means saying it's a bad album. There's still lots of terrific songs on here, and there's still a lot of fans out there that really, really like Hold Your Fire. So it's not a bad album, but for me, this is the point where that synth rock style starts to get very, very tiring. It's almost like one album too many of the synth period. To me, Power Windows is like the apex of Rush's synthesizer style. And, this is just kind of like an extra one that tagged along. And when you compare it to the other 80s albums, it lacks the freshness and excitement of Signals. It doesn't really have the hard rock edge of Grace Under Pressure, and it's not as complex as Power Windows. But, all that being said, it still has its merits. What I find very interesting about this album, actually, is we start to see them maturing as songwriters quite a bit. And obviously they'd always written their own songs, but there's always been a different sort of modus operandi there. The very early days, it's like, check out these songs with these heavy blues riffs, and then it's check out these intricate passages and these extended songs with conceptual lyrics. Then in the 80s, it's like check out these complex textured songs with all the sequencers and whatnot. And this is very much a part of that, sequencer, synthesizer style, but they sow a seed here, which is more of an ethos of check out these songs. And it's not quite so much about the chops or the technique, it's about, getting the perfect set of chords and melody and hooks to create a really, really good song. And that's really kind of like the mindset that they were at in the early 90s, I think. And that really starts on this album. And I think, that actually contributes to the album having a very poppy, almost AOR sound, adult-oriented rock. Because they're thinking more in terms of melody and hook, that ethos in conjecture with the sound palette they're using with all the synthesizers, it does give it a very poppy, adult-oriented rock kind of feel to it. And, that also dates it quite a bit. Again, the keyboard sound choices are, they would have been modern at the time, but certainly not by today's standards. But that's okay; it's forgivable. It's like I said, it still has lots of merits. Something else I was gonna say. I'm sure I've lost it. But anyway, we'll just start dissecting the tracks here. We'll try and make this video a little bit shorter than the other ones. So the album opens with Force 10. Now this is actually one of the great songs on the album, and it's certainly a Rush classic. I love the suspense of the opening. That big choir sound, and we get really, really cool. And then the drums kick in. It's almost like Rush does Highway Star by Deep Purple. And it's got a really cool build up. I love that funky bass line that comes in, and then when Alex comes in with that riff, the excitement really builds, and it is one of those high energy, great Rush numbers. And it's almost like a false start to the album, because you throw it on and it's like, oh wow, like get ready, this is going to be a ride. But Force 10 it's a little bit different from the other tracks on the album, I find. It is an album that does have that edge. It's probably Rush's softest album on the whole, but Force 10 gives it less softness and more edginess, which is good. They've got a great middle section. There's one point where it's all kind of jumbled. It's like a musical jigsaw, kind of like a Gentle Giant thing. I really like that part. Lyrically, it's really cool. This is another collaboration with Pi Dubois, the Max Webster lyricist. And it's about, the storms of life raging at Force 10, which is really quite cool. Cool lyric to start it off. And the song winds its way up. It goes back into that weird mechanical drum intro, and then that closes the song off quite quickly. And yeah, it's definitely one of the great numbers on the album for me. Track 2, Time Stands Still. This is one of the big numbers on the album. This was a big hit for him at the time. Unfortunately, I can't get my mind off of the music video that was made. It was a very strange music video, and you know, they're very much in their 80s, you know, fashion sense, and Geddy Lee's kind of flying all over the camera space. It's very, very strange. Not a big fan of the music video, but the song itself is okay. Time Stands Still. Um, we can definitely hear a bit of that AOR sound for a lot of it. You know, this is definitely, you know, rushed as a pop song for sure. But you know, it's not bad. I think it's lyrically, it might be some of my favorite pure lyrics actually. You know, time stands still. It's about you know, the passage of time and how, you know, innocence slips away. You know, and I mean, for example, if you go on a great vacation or something like that, and you have the best time ever with your best friends and family, and you wanna keep that feeling and that sensation of that moment in time for as long as you can. But you know, the further along you go in life, the farther, you know, the farther those experiences go. So I really like that lyrical concept, which is cool. It's also notable because as a guest vocalist, Amy Mann sings the title of the song in the chorus, which is quite cool. It's got a cool little middle section in 7/4. So that's, you know, a little nod to their proggier styles, you know, putting that weird time signature in there. But you know, still, it's an okay song. You know, I know it's the big hit and it's quite popular, but it's certainly not on the same caliber as some of other classic Rush songs, certainly. Moving on to track 3, Open Secrets. Now this is quite a good song. Again, it opens with that familiar sequencer. You know, it was very well established at this point. So I mean, it doesn't have the excitement of hearing it for the first time on the other albums. But the song itself, Open Secrets, is really, really good. It is a bit more proggy in the sense of that there's lots of ups and downs and tempo changes. You know, like I said, the sequencer intro is a kind of a long, extended intro before it goes into the main part of the song. It's a song that I think probably could have been heavier, but the tone of those synthesizers softens it up quite a bit. That slow part, doom doom, bow bow, no no no, because it's got that warm synth tone, right? So it's not, you know, it's big and it's grand, and I mean, it's heavy in terms of the density in the mix, but it doesn't have that crunching heaviness that, you know, they would later get really, really good at several albums from now. But you know, it's a good song. I think I like the music a lot more on Open Secrets than Time Stands Still, but I like the lyrics of Time Stands Still much better. The lyrics are a bit, they don't quite do it for me on Open Secrets. There's also a nice, very dynamic middle section there with Open Secrets, which is really good. Moving on to track 4, Second Nature. This is where the album starts to get a bit stale for me. You know, I can tell that the arrangement of Second Nature is all very, very good. You know, it's a song that builds gently over time. But you know, the songs just never grabbed me. You know, when the song first opens and it's just Geddy singing and kind of like an electric piano sound. You know, it just feels so not Rush. Of course, you know, as the song builds up, it becomes more of, you know, that classic vibe. And it does kind of have the movement kind of feel, like not so much a verse chorus type thing, but I don't know. It's just never quite grabbed me. It's not one of my favorites, unfortunately. Second Nature. I'm sure lots of you out there really like it, but that's cool. Anyway, track 5 wraps up the first side of the album. We get Prime Mover. Again, it's okay. You know, they're trying to rock harder with this song, I would say. Yeah, I must say I like the lyrics, as I studied. You know, I'm currently an electrical apprentice right now, so you know, lyrics about electricity is that's kind of a cool thing. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the Permanent Waves kind of ethos. You know, it's very, very upbeat and optimistic. There's a lot more happy songs on Hold Your Fire than the other 80s albums as well. That's a notable thing. And you know, it's got that happy guitar riff, and the bass and the guitar switch back and forth on that riff a little bit, which is cool. But it's still not one of my favorites. It's okay. Anything can happen. Kind of sounds a little bit like what they would explore later on Presto on the next album, which we'll talk about next time. Anyway, we'll flip the side over to side 2, which opens with Lock and Key. This This would be a really, really good song, but I think it's too long. I think this would make a really excellent, like, 3-minute song. I mean, there's probably a couple of sections they could have edited out. You know, I really like the very opening. That big sweeping orchestral bit is very grand, and that's a fantastic moment. Um, and you know, very dramatic. You know, it's got a great hook, a dramatic hook with, you know, I don't wanna face the killer instinct. But my problem with it is I think they use that hook too much, and it's a little bit repetitive. The song, it just kind of, it doesn't, you know, there's not enough change or diversity in the song to really sustain my interest personally. But I mean, you know, all that being said, like the very end, you know, that orchestral bit winds into the rocking part of the song, and it is one of the higher energy numbers on the album. Um, you know, and it's got its merits. Like I said, the way that the orchestral bit comes in again towards the end is really great, but it just feels a little too long. It feels like there's a bit of padding put into the song. But that's just me. Moving on to the next track on the album, track 7 of the album overall, track 2 on side 2, Mission. This is arguably another one of the big classics on the album. It's probably Force 10, Time Stand Still, and Mission are the ones that they play live most of the time. And it's a great track. This is definitely one of my favorites on the album. Even though you can hear that AOR sound in the verses, you know, towards the first half of the song, there are moments where you hear that sort of AOR sound. It's the part that Alex plays. Da da na na. But that, you know, that's fine. It's still a very grand number. You know, you know, the opening is very, very, you know, calming and, you know, nice. But you know, towards the end of the song, it does get very, very grand. And it also has a really cool instrumental section with all kinds of weird timings. Again, there's certainly a nod to the you know, late '70s era of Rush, with the middle section of Mission. That's the highlight for me. One of the highlights of the album, actually. I love that the little vibraphone sound that Pierre uses. That's a really, really cool part. And it all winds its way up, and that's one of those, you know, great high energy moments on the album. There's a great Lifeson guitar solo bit that pops up there, and it all winds its way back into that warm synth tone that from then on just builds, and it does get very grand. You know, Mission in general, it really does feel, it does have that, you know, classic proggy vibe, you know, the classic proggy Rush vibe, but it's just saturated with those synth tones, which is okay. You know, it's still a great song for what it's worth. And in general, Mission is a Rush classic. Who am I kidding? Anyway, moving on, track 3 of side 2 is Turn the Page. This wasn't a huge thing for him, but for me it's a contender for one of the best songs on the album. I really like Turn the Page, actually. Love the way that the bass opens it up. That's really cool. And it's all about that chorus. The chorus is just, you know, so high energy. And I love all the rhythmic variations that Pierre throws into it. That's all really cool. We disengage, we turn the page. You know, again, it's a strong hook, but it's not overused. It's got lots of great energy to it. Really cool middle section. It's still very much in the synthesizer style. I mean, there's those familiar sounds are there. There's all kinds of sequencers and whatnot that pop up, but there's an energy to Turn the Page that I find really appealing. Yeah, definitely a great song. One of my favorites of the late '80s period. Good stuff. There's a great live version on Show of Hands too. I love that one sequencer. Great stuff. Anyway, moving on. Getting towards the end of the album now. Track 9 is Tai Shan. Perhaps the most awkward Rush track ever. When it comes on and that kind of that flute patch pops up, it's almost like, what? You know, it's so strange. And you know, lyrically, it's about Pierre's travels to China. And you know, they try to blend that synthesizer style with you know, traditional Chinese music, and it just really doesn't come across. You know, it's still an okay song. You know, I mean, it's still well arranged and all that, but it is a little bit awkward. I really like the sound of the synthesizer towards the middle of the song, where it's got the very sweeping, you know, when it goes from one note to another. I do like the tone of that, but you know, the song is a bit off. for my tastes. It would have been great if it was like a bonus track on the album. If the album proper only had 9 songs, and then, you know, for one of the remasters, oh, bonus track Tai Shan, this is a thing they did in this studio. That would be like, oh, that's interesting. But being on the actual album itself is kind of, what? Bit of a curiosity, but that's fine. Moving on to the final track of the album, track 10, track 5 of side 2, we got High Water. This is one of those songs that surprises me every time I listen to it. I tend to forget about it. It's not necessarily memorable, but when I do hear it, it's like, oh wow, that's a really good song. It's kind of very, you know, the drum pattern is very much, you know, in the style of like the Power Windows thing, in that it's a very textured drum pattern in itself. And there's a really cool intro that kind of sets it all up with synthesizer, and then Lifeson doing some cool tonal things on the guitar. And yeah, when the song actually kind of, you know, gets into it, you know, it really is a great little song, and it's got lots of different sections to it. There's something about it too that really seems to herald the future of Rush as well. You know, there's I'm not sure what it is, because it's still loaded with synthesizers. It's part of the synth era, but I don't know. There's a certain stylistic thing there with the way that the melody sits. Perhaps I can't really pinpoint it down, but there's a stylistic thing that would become very prevalent on you know, Roll the Bones and Presto as well. But you know, High Waters, it points towards the 90s for Rush, I think. So that's interesting. And it is a great song, and it wraps up the album. So there you go. Like I said, there's still lots of great songs on the album, and all the songs have their merits, but just it's not quite up to the caliber of the other Rush albums, really. And as such, it is one of the weaker Rush albums. And that doesn't mean it's a bad album. Like I said, you know, a bad Rush album, or that's not a bad Rush album. You know, a weaker Rush album is still a great album in general. So so there you go. That's Hold Your Fire by Rush. We've made it through the soup period, because of course the next video is going to be about Presto when they start moving away from that. So stay tuned for that. If you enjoyed the video, please do not hesitate to like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you very much for listening to my incoherent ramblings, and you will see me in the future for more Rush Chats. Take care.